Let's move on to AI. Okay, why do you think AI can have a big impact in project management?
Project management has so many things that are going on in it. And in bigger projects, there's so many moving pieces. I think that it can be difficult to keep track of them all. And I think this is where AI comes in to helping in the project management space. So I see a lot, because I'm in PMI, Project Management Institute, so I'm active in there. I'm a mentor in the PMI space as well. Got my local group here in Vancouver, and I've worked with other organizations here, or at least spoken with other organizations here that are implementing AI. And one of the things I see is a lot of people are focused on prompting. How do I build a good prompt? How do I refine a prompt? And there's a lot of thinking around that. But that really just gets me to building content or summarizing some kind of a document to give me some information about something that exists. And I think those are all very good things. I think those are all very useful and valuable things. But things that I think are more interesting from a project management perspective is let AI do some of the thinking around the deliverables that are being produced, the activities that are happening on the project, and the quality of those deliverables that are happening on the project.
Today, I'm joined by Grant Tecco, founder of Fisher Peak Management, to talk about his journey from startups to giants like Telus and SAP, and how he's using AI to transform project management and decision-making. Let's dive in.
Hi Grant, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. And yourself?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for coming on the podcast. And let's start with your introduction, because I was going through your profile and there's a lot to cover there. So yeah, if you can talk about your background, that'll be great.
Yeah, sure, no problems. So I'll start off. My name is Grant Tecco. I have been in the project management, delivery, and product management space for about 20 years now, working with everything from small startups to the larger consulting firms. So I've got a great background in the different kinds of organizations that are out there, and helping those organizations build their delivery capabilities and deliver the vision, the changes that those organizations are looking for. And so right now, I've taken the last year off of the corporate world, and I've been working on my own company called Fisher Peak Management. It's actually been around for a little bit longer than just this last year, but I've refocused it this year to be really looking at how AI can enable project management. I am part of the Vancouver PMO community, which is a project management leadership peer group here in Vancouver. We've had a lot of interest in AI lately, and I've been one of the participants in that group that's sort of been a trailblazer in the AI space for project management. And so I'm really focused in that area now around project management, AI, and how we improve our delivery capabilities.
That's very interesting, and we are going to come back to that. But I still want to cover more in your background. I saw that you had your own company for a really long time, from 1998 to 2010. Like, you were doing like 3 different things there. Can you cover that?
Yeah, sure. If I go back in my background a little bit more, I came out of school, started my first company. It was called Ashta Systems. Well, actually, I started to work there. It was a very small company, about 5 people. And then it sort of, as it started to grow, I got onto the leadership team there, started working with the co-founder at Ashta. We grew the company to the point where it got acquired by a company in Toronto. And I kind of got a taste for that entrepreneurial spirit, company building and building delivery excellence, and really understanding what customers need and really being able to deliver on that. So from there, I actually went over to Telus, and I got a position over at Telus as program manager. And this is like way back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, as I like to say. And Telus was at that point buying up all of the internet service providers, and they were coming out with their own high-speed internet service. Their challenge that they had was they had no way to be able, to provision those services for their customers was going to take about 20 minutes per call with the customer in order to set things up in all the systems. And the number of customers they needed to onboard, they would not be able to compete with Rogers at the time at being able to, at a speed of 20 minutes per person. They need to get that down to like minutes, like 1 or 2 minutes, not 20 minutes. And so this project was to consolidate, I think I remember like 12 different systems in Telus into like one platform that they could just easily go into and be able to put the information into. And they had IBM in, and IBM looked at it and said, problem too difficult to solve. We can't do that in this limited amount of time. This needs to be a bigger project, so on and so forth. Me at the time, thinking very entrepreneurial and probably young and not really realizing what I got into, just said, sure, let's do it. So I got this project team together, a couple of young guys, and we just sort of dove into it, and we treated it like we're just going to listen to what we need at a bare minimum, and we're going to just deliver that to the customer, and we're not really going to worry about the quality of it too much. We're not going to worry about the architecture of it too much. We're just going to get them the features so that the business can meet their business goal. As it turns out, we actually managed to get this thing out the door in the time frame that was required. It was a very ugly beast, and it needed a lot of support. And I think there were a lot of people in the IT department at the time that weren't really happy with us because we cut so many corners. But we had a lot of protection from the business because they were like, this was literally impacting our stock price. Like, this literally gave us what we needed in order to get our stock where we needed to get to meet the business objectives that we needed to get to. So we don't care if it's not like the prettiest thing in the world, it worked. And so one of the things I learned from there, again, was reinforcing this idea of being entrepreneurial is not a bad thing. And what we actually came to the conclusion of is we were starting to implement Agile within this like very rigid waterfall type environment. And for our next iteration, when we started to bring in Telus TV, we started to set it up like very much like an Agile type project. And we were the first project to actually bring Agile into Telus. And being able to bring that type of thinking in and that kind of flexibility as you're designing the system really allowed them to take some of those products that were taking a lot of time, some of those things they wanted to do, and really accelerate them. I think there was a big billing project that was happening after that. They were replacing their whole billing system, and I know they took a lot of those principles with people that came in for that. So that's like that's my early background. I mean, from there, I went off, stumbled into this little company, Make Technologies. They were trying to build this product set around being able to look at legacy systems. So these are like the old like mainframes, green screen systems that companies have had for ages, and they wanted to get onto more of a modern platform so that they could have more functionality. They were more flexible. They could deliver more things to their clients. Problem is, in those situations, is that these systems have been around for a long time. The people that develop them are no longer around. People have got all kinds of workarounds, so you're not really sure what all those business processes look like. You're not really sure what all that logic looks like. And so this company was trying to solve that problem. And they're trying to solve it with some coding tools, basically like code generation tools, maybe early days of what we're doing right now and with AI with code generation. But I didn't see like a lot of value in it. And this is coming from Telus, and I'd worked with a lot of legacy systems. And I said, I was thinking to myself, the tools that they're using to build the tools they're selling, I think are more valuable than the tools that they're building. And so I worked with the team to take their requirements management tool, their data modeling tool, their requirements gathering tool, and make them into something that we could do a show and tell with, and brought it to their VP of sales and said, let's go test this on a couple of customers. Let's just kind of show them this and paint a vision. And he agreed, and we did, and it took off like wildfire. People were like, never seen this before. This is amazing. These are the things we want. And the whole company ended up pivoting around this product set. I fell into the role in that case. I went from the product and delivery side over to a project and delivery side over to product, because I had these ideas. Basically spent the next 3 years of my life on the road with sales and promoting this product and really building the company. And we were really successful. We grew it from a company that was really losing money at the time to one that was extremely profitable, and ended up getting bought out by Dell Systems. So it was a really good story. And I think as I kind of go through my career, it's sort of the same thing. Then, my connections at IBM, they got me off onto like other larger companies like SAP, where I worked in expert services, which is a team of people that come into the more challenging projects that SAP does, or projects that are in trouble, and do project rescues, project audits. So I had a team there that was working on those. I oversaw an 18-month project rescue for this global supplier of computer peripherals. It's called computer or electronic parts. And so they consolidate everybody else's inventory into one inventory, and then they can sell out to very much like Amazon kind of thing. You could go in and say, hey, I need a mouse, and they would be able to say, okay, so I can give you Logitech mouses. They're in these warehouses, these quantities from these suppliers. And so in their case, they would just say, let me tell the supplier to send that to you, because this is a B2B, business to business type situation, not business to consumer type situation. So this huge product catalog they were replacing. They had all kinds of wacky performance requirements, business rule requirements. And again, everyone's like, impossible. And I just came in with until they tell me to stop, then we're just going to keep going. And so we did. It was great. It was 18 months. It was pure chaos. I think I lost half my hair on it. But at the end of the day, we were successful. We turned this thing around. We had to rebuild a lot of it. We actually had to create our own rules engine. We built some technologies like from scratch in order to meet some of the performance goals for this customer. So that's my background. I mean, I go through the whole resume, but I think that sort of summarizes kind of my thinking, how I sort of approach things, my kind of get her done kind of attitude, I guess, which I get a lot from my family, my background. My grandmother was actually a fairly successful businesswoman here in Vancouver. She owned a franchising business. She franchised her business out. Very successful with that. I learned a lot of business and customer relationship habits and skills from her. So I'm very appreciative of her for what she taught me and passed on to me for my career.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I also noticed that you have built software for automotive repair shop as well as like window and door manufacturing.
Oh my goodness, you've gone way back in my resume. Yeah. So again, a little bit entrepreneurial there. I was working just out of high school. I was kind of needed a job. So there was a window and door manufacturer that was in Chilliwack. And they were just starting. So the owner, Casey, had a business before. He had some problems with his brother, so he was restarting. And it was like just brand new. And he needed something that he could do quotes with, estimates, quotes, and then turn that into a bill for the customer. So it was really just like reading the product list, being able to type it in and kind of get it up, almost something you can do in a spreadsheet. So I built it for him, and he thought that was pretty cool. So then he asked me if I would do like a little bit more work on the IT side as they were sort of growing things out, which I agreed to. And then as things started to build a little bit more, the requirements started to get more and more complicated. To start with, they were just buying the windows. So they just needed to be able to know what size it was. And then they started to build the frames and then buy the sealed unit. So now we needed to have software that knew how to cut the materials. Then they started to make the glass. So now we have to know how to cut the glass, cut the spacer bars, cut the mutton bars those are the pattern bars inside. Then we had to start to worry about inventory, and we had to worry about wastage. And then we had to start worrying about shipping. And then we got really complicated. And how do you make like a bay and bow window? So those are the ones that curve. And so now we're starting to use a little bit of algebra and geometry. I can remember this is a funny story. I was sitting there going, I'm going to solve this problem. And I went and got my math textbook from high school, and I thought, damn, I never thought I was going to use any of this stuff. And then here I am looking it up, trying to figure these formulas out to make it work. But I ended up building the software. And to my surprise, I thought like this was just going to be a one-off thing. But I started to have other door and window manufacturers ask me about it. So I talked to the owner, Casey, and he said, yeah, sure, like go for it. And I ended up selling it out to, I think, 5 or 6 I had clients. I mean, not a lot, but it was good extra money, and I got some revenue off of it. Then that spun off into our supplier who supplied the glass to us, and they needed something for their inventory management. And so I said, well, what I have, I could probably repurpose for you. And so I sat down with them, spent a couple weekends with them getting requirements, trying some things out, and built kind of a version of it that would run their glass manufacturing, like pure glass, bring in the crates of glass, cut that glass, and then re-inventory it. Again, account for wastage, be able to give the machinery the instructions they need to do the cutting. We call them cut sheets. So I built all that. So really early days of my career, I was actually building ERP software. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was actually building ERP software.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I love it when you find problems in niche industries. So this is really cool. I also noticed that you have worked in the healthcare industry as well. Mm-hmm. A couple of times. Like, how was that experience compared to others?
That was really interesting. And that's actually where Fisher Peak started, because that was contract work that I did. And it was the first time that I really dove into really doing contract work. And so at the time that started with McKesson, who later became Change Healthcare. And again, here was an opportunity for me where they're a product and hardware supplier here out of Richmond. It's a global company, but the Richmond division did diagnostic imaging for radiology and cardiology. And so they were selling their software and their hardware to the clients, but they weren't selling services. And so they were running into some challenges with keeping their customers happy because they would go in, set things up, do some training, leave, maybe do a staff augmentation with like an administrator. But oftentimes there were some unhappy customers in some of the larger sites. So there was this idea that if we built a services business, that we could try to address some of those concerns. Not only that, but then the services business could be, a separate revenue generation entity for the business unit that was running outside of Richmond. So this is where I came into the equation. There was a gentleman there that was leading up that effort. He really wanted someone that could think about those services, look at trying to solve that problem. And I'd actually done something very similar at Make Technologies earlier, where we had put together a program that really does like an assessment, a problem assessment and a technology assessment. And then from that assessment, we can make recommendations for what we need to do and where we need to solve problems. And we were using that to feed into sales, feed into support, and so forth. So I made the suggestion that we do the same thing at McKesson. Also said that we could charge for it, which just blew them away. They didn't think that. They thought I was crazy. Actually, they told me afterwards that they walked out of the meeting with me and thought I was absolutely nuts for saying that I could charge for something like that, because I said, that's just a pure sales play. You can't charge for that. But I did. So I set that program up. We had to adjust it a lot because obviously this is healthcare. So I got to work with radiologists, the actual physicians, cardiologists, the actual physicians, then the technologists, the techs that actually do the scans and work before they go to the radiologists for reading or the cardiologists for examination. And we came up with this whole assessment program that looks at the technology, the clinical workflows, the people that are involved, so staffing and so forth. And we developed a report card, I guess. So we'd broken it into 26 parts of the organization of cardiology and radiology, and we could rate each one and have recommendations for things that were hotspots to be resolved, as well as quick wins. We always had a bunch of quick wins with that. I learned so much on that. I like super enjoyed it, just learning about how the healthcare industry. The challenges that they have in the healthcare industry. We set out and we did, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but we set out into a program that would look at 40 different hospitals across North America, the UK and Ireland. And we did all of these assessments. And as we were doing them, not only did we drive the business from the assessments perspective, we were actually able to charge for it, and we were generating revenue from it, which I think about a year into it, the director actually came to me and said, I got to admit, when you told me this, you're going to charge for it, I thought you were like nuts. And we all kind of almost laughed when we left the boardroom. He says, but like, you actually did it, and you're charging for this. You've made it a revenue generator. And I said, sure, because it actually provides value. People find these things very useful. And it also helped us drive business for the hardware software sales. It helped us identify customer satisfaction issues that were happening, where we could have the account manager address that with the clients. We found opportunities for staff augmentation, where we could bring people in to help with challenges that were happening on site where they didn't have the resources or talent experience in that area. So we were able to really increase that customer satisfaction, plus drive a lot of different other business opportunities and revenue streams for McKesson and later Change Healthcare.
This seemed really hard. Like, for example, like if I focus on the people, process, and technology framework, how they're interconnected. So when you dive into a company and you try to fix something, like what do you start with, and how do you get people to like start using the new technology? How do you go about it?
Oh, okay. So that kind of just depends, I guess, on the organization. So I really sat down, and this really starts from the perspective of like, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And this is the case with Make. This is the case with McKesson, even SAP, and some of the bigger other kinds of work that I've done. Like, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And that's not as easy as it may seem, because people often think the solution is what they need, and they're not really understanding what their problem is. So, and then also, when you ask what the problem is, they'll give you a problem statement, but it doesn't sound right. So you end up in that, like the 3-question rule, like, what's the problem? And they say it's this. Why is it that? Oh, because of this? Okay, well, why is that? Oh, because of this. And so you have to spend that time really trying to figure out what that problem statement is. And I think when you get to there, then you can start thinking about what the solutions are. And you're on a much better footing to actually find solutions to those problems and be able to drive that change. The second thing after that, and I think is the really important thing, is who are going to be the champions of this. Like, if you don't have some sort of executive sponsorship for this, if you don't have some sort of executive leadership for this, it's very difficult to take that as a grassroots effort up in any kind of organization that's sort of medium to large. I think in smaller sort of startup companies, that's a lot easier to do because it's fairly flat. Everyone kind of knows each other. So I think those grassroots efforts work really well. It gets a little bit more challenging as you start working in the larger organizations.
And how long does it take to make a change in an organization?
Oh, it can be as short as like 3 months or as long as like a year and a half, 2 years. I mean, it can have, depending on the amount of change, the size of the organization, that time shift can really vary. For some of the bigger work that I've done, it's definitely been sort of in the 12 to 18 month kind of time frame to make a significant change in an organization. Even with Make, and like, we had a really good idea. We went out, the customers liked it. It still took like a good 6 months before we were starting to get buy-in from the rest of the organization on really pivoting on the product and getting into the new space. And that was only with like 10 people that were working there, 15 people that were working there maybe.
Let's move on to AI. Okay, why do you think AI can have a big impact in project management?
Project management has so many things that are going on in it. And in bigger projects, there's so many moving pieces. I think that it can be difficult to keep track of them all. And I think this is where AI comes in to helping in the project management space. So I see a lot, because I'm in the PMI, Project Management Institute, so I'm active in there. I'm a mentor in the PMI space as well. Got my local group here in Vancouver, and I've worked with other organizations here, or at least spoken with other organizations here that are implementing AI. And one of the things I see is a lot of people are focused on prompting. How do I build a good prompt? How do I refine a prompt? And there's a lot of thinking around that. But that really just gets me to building content or summarizing some kind of a document to give me some information about something that exists. And I think those are all very good things. I think those are all very useful and valuable things. But things that I think are more interesting from a project management perspective is let AI do some of the thinking around the deliverables that are being produced, the activities that are happening on the project, and the quality of those deliverables that are happening on the project. If you think about a project that's executing, that project, let's just say simplistically has a schedule, has some risks, has some issues, has some status reports, and has some meeting notes, and has a budget. I mean, that's probably the other thing, it's schedule. So you're managing those different pieces, usually at different times. And you're looking over the different things. What AI can do is a couple of things. So the first thing it can do is it can look at your project profile and say, you're executing this kind of project. It can go into your risk log and say, here are some suggestions on risks that you might be missing, because for projects with this kind of a profile, I think you should maybe consider these risks. So I think that's a great thing. The next thing it can do is it can go through that risk log and issue log, and it can say, here are risks and issues that aren't formatted appropriately. So maybe they don't have clear actions on it. They're not assigned. They're missing a due date. So it can look at the quality of those risks and issues, inform the appropriate people to be able to bring that quality level up. And I think that right there is really important. The next thing that it can do that I find is like super powerful is you can ask the question, where are my blind spots? What am I not seeing? So it can look at the collection of information that you have in your repository. And it can say things like, and I've have it do this, say things like, sponsor X has mentioned 3 times about a concern, but we don't see that in a risk log or mentioned in a status report. You may want to look at that, right? So it can find these inconsistencies between your different project artifacts and bring that forward. Same thing as those risks. It might come out and say, or an issue. It might even find an issue and say, I think this might be an issue in your project because I'm looking at your status report and your schedule, and I'm looking at your staffing levels, your demand capacity management on the project, and I think this is an issue that you should be logging as an issue. I think those for me are like the big wins in the project management space. I mean, auto meeting minute generation, building content for a charter, like giving you a draft charter, I think reviewing a contract to give you the key points of the contract. I think those things are all very useful, and I know a lot of people are using. But I think those bigger quality check on your project is where the big value is. They're going to be the things that you can catch quickly, that are going to prevent escalations, that are going to lead to overruns and other issues on your project.
Yeah, those sound really useful. What I'm thinking is context engineering is really important there, like what documents and information you would provide to the AI to like figure out what's wrong with the project proposal. How do you make sure, if a project manager has never used AI, how do you like go about like telling them like what's important and how do you use AI?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I actually started from that perspective. So I know the bigger project management systems out there, and I've used them before, and I think they're really great, and they're starting to have some AI in them. But I started to think from the perspective of a lot of the people I know don't have those big systems. I'm surprised actually at how many organizations just don't have like big project management systems. So I thought, what can I do with AI if I'm basically running projects off of spreadsheets, Word documents, and things like that. And so I did a little bit of testing, and I created a custom GPT. And in the custom GPT, all I did is I took a project that I'd done before and just anonymized it all and made up some facts. And I just dumped all those documents in, just Word documents, Excel documents, a couple WordPad things or notepad things in there. And then I just started to ask some questions. And I was really surprised how it was able to understand the context of the project, what was missing, what was going well. And I took it even one step further because I'd put 4 projects in. I'd ask the question, as the manager of the project management office, I have the project managers reporting to me. Based on how the projects are going, what kind of feedback could I give my project managers in my bi-weekly one-on-one meeting? And it came back and said, Project Manager 1, these are the topics that you should talk about. Here's how to structure that topic. Here are your talking points on it. Here's how you can have that conversation over the next 4 sessions that you have with them. And then the next project manager and the next project manager. I was like, wow, I can look at the health of my project. I can find the gaps in areas that I'm not looking at, and I can actually ask for advice on how to mentor my project managers in my team. And I mean, obviously, it doesn't get it all right? Like, it gives you a bunch of advice on a project manager based on what it sees in the project. And I can say something like, well, I know that's just a troubled project, and I know why that's troubled, and the project manager is actually really good, but they're just in this really precarious situation right now. So I get why AI said that, but I'm gonna override that particular one. But in other cases, I'm like, yeah, those are actually really good points that I could add to the list of things to talk about with the team. So the whole thing there is there wasn't you don't need a lot of skill for that. You just need to put the documents in your custom GPT. There's a simple instruction set that you put in there, and then when you've got some well-formatted prompts, you get this information out. It's really not that hard.
That's true. But sometimes what happens is the model gets confused if you put a lot of information in there, and then you might cross the context length that the model can take in. So you might want to limit the documentation that you're putting in.
Correct. Yeah. So you're right. So there is some context. There's just definitely some context you have to look for. There is some limitation to the amount of documentation that you can put in to the models. So you do have to take those things into consideration. But I've actually been surprised how much I can put in and still be able to get really useful information out. Even if I've done this, I did this when I was working at Van City. We had the different repositories. So we had them in SharePoint. So you might have the RAID log in SharePoint. And so I would just point Copilot at that and just have that inspect for RAID details for both enterprise risk management and for project risk management. And do the same thing for schedule, look at the schedule and the resource balancing on the schedule and just point it at that. So if we've got a lot of things on the go and we got big repositories, that works. If you're in a smaller organization, I think you can get a lot of that stuff into the GPT, even into just a prompt thread itself or a project prompt, and it'll be able to manage all that within the context window. Especially now as GPT-5's come out and it's able to handle a much larger context window than 4 did. And I'm actually seeing quite an improvement in 5 over 4 when we're looking at those big document sets.
When you're consulting, how do you convey to your clients that sometimes these things work so well that you start relying on them a lot more than you should be? That these things hallucinate and they can make mistakes and they can be very confident about that. How do you convey that?
Yeah, I'm always saying check the work and don't rely on the AI out. And I can give them like some examples. There's a great example from Air Canada where they had a pilot with a AI pilot, not a flight pilot, AI pilot with that was providing ticketing information, and it hallucinated a little bit. It gave like the wrong information to the customer. Then Air Canada came back and said, no, we can't honor that. That ended up becoming it ended up going to court, and the ruling was that Air Canada is responsible for what the AI produces and tells the customer. It can't just say AI did it, it hallucinated, it was a technical issue. So I bring this up and I say, like, this is why it's important to be able to review the work, make sure that there's a level of accuracy that's in that work. I actually did a blog posting on this that came out of a dinner that I had with a friend of mine, and we were talking about AI, and we had me as the AI enthusiast. Everything should go into AI. My partner, who is a therapist who cautiously uses AI, he's got a lot of confidentiality concerns, so is very cautious about how to use AI. And then my friend, who is doing his master's in healthcare administration, and he's like, no, AI 0, because it just takes all of your creativity away. It's not your work. You don't own it. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. And so I thought it was kind of funny that we had these like 3 positions, and I started to sort of think about what it really meant, and really thinking about my friend's comment about you're not creative, you're open up yourself to too many mistakes. And I started to explore that a little bit and thinking about, like, if you stop questioning and you stop thinking, then AI is no longer your tool. You're now the tool for AI, and AI is doing the job. And so it's kind of the argument that I make in this blog post is like, be really careful that you don't become the tool to AI, and that you remain the person that's using AI as a tool. Like, don't capitulate all of your work and all of your skills to AI.
The blog post sounds really fun. If you can send me the link, I'll add it to the podcast description.
Sure.
How do you measure ROI when you're adding AI to a process?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I was meeting with a company recently, and they've been implementing AI. They're smaller, I think 5-ish people, import-export business, and they've lost 8 people, just attrition, lost 8 people, and they've not had to hire them back because they've managed to replace all of those roles with AI. So that's in customer service, that's in logistics and planning and marketing. They've been able to replace all of those roles with AI. And I think, like, it blew me away looking at what they were doing, the things that they were implementing. And I think those become like super simple ROIs, right? Like, you've essentially eliminated the cost of a role in an organization. So I'm a little bit on the fence about, because it's not nice to see a lot of roles being replaced, but from an ROI perspective, you can really see where that ROI comes into play. From a project management perspective, I think that if we're looking at it from the project perspective, I think we can see the ROI over time savings. I think we have enough information, at least I have enough information to know how much time a team spends on producing status reports, on doing reviews, on producing different documents like change requests, contract reviews. I think we got some good benchmarks for those, so we can use those as our benchmarks to see what our improvements are against that and come up with an ROI on that. I guess if someone wanted to become really strict about it, we could do some of those measurements up front, but I think most people don't disagree with kind of my rough numbers that I have from my experience and background, and so that's what I put forward first.
That's a good point. You have to measure it
Yeah.
to actually figure out what's happening. I have one more question. What kind of misconceptions have you seen people have about AI?
Oh, so I've seen people afraid of it. I've seen people think that their jobs are going to be replaced by it, which I don't necessarily think is true. I think it's going to impact some, definitely there are going to be some jobs that are impacted by it. But I also think that if you're building the skills to be able to use AI to do your job better, I think that you're going to find some job security in there. And I do think, even though I guess there's still a lot of debate on this, but I do think there's going to be some new jobs that are created with it. I think, develop. For example, I mean, there's a lot of examples in kind of customer service and marketing, but I think more in IT. I think we're seeing a lot of development jobs disappearing because AI is able to generate code. But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of jobs being created around data analytics and just model refinement and model training skills. So we are seeing new IT-ish jobs being created, and other ones sort of disappearing. But that's happened in IT before. I think it's just happening faster and maybe pivots a lot quicker and a lot larger right now. So a lot of people are feeling the impact of it. I think it was slower in the past. So it's putting a lot of fear into people as we're trying to adjust to this pivot that's happening.
I want to cover something more about your career actually. Since you've been in the industry for so long, you must have seen this happen so many times. Like a new technology comes in and like a lot is changing. Like I'm just like kind of what's the future going to look like since you've experienced this multiple times before?
I'm not sure. I'm kind of excited to figure out what the future is going to look like. There's so many areas that are exciting, but I've seen this before. So I don't know. I just keep using this as an example with Make because we just did so many things in that company and we went through so many different things. But one of the things that we saw happening there is we were dealing with a lot of cutting edge, bleeding edge technologies that were actually McKesson, the same thing too. There's a lot of bleeding edge, cutting edge technologies that were coming out. And people were saying, no, not now. Like, especially I think at McKesson because it was healthcare related and they're like industry regulations. We've got all kinds of things that we're concerned about. Like we can't be this flexible. We're not going to be able to adopt to this technology. And long story short, but what I end up seeing is that those bleeding edge technologies do make a change in the marketplace or in the organizations. They don't happen as fast as people think they're going to happen, and that's simply because organizations, especially larger ones, just move slowly. So it doesn't matter how revolutionary the technology is. There's a lot of process to think about, a lot of regulations that have to be considered, a lot of policies that have to be considered, and that's just moves slow, even if the technology is there. I don't see anything revolutionary like being implemented at an organization in under 18, 24 months, just from that perspective. The other thing that I've seen as these sort of larger technology pivots come into play is that there's 10 really exciting, revolutionary things that are going to like just change everything on Earth. And by the time the dust settles, 5 of them actually happened. And the other 5 were a bit of a stretch and didn't quite pan out the way people thought it was going to be, meaning that there was a big pivot, there is a big change. It wasn't quite as big as what people thought. And I see the same thing with AI. If you think about the amount of compute power that's needed to run some of these models, it's really expensive. And I know they're likely to make progress on that. But right now, it's still pretty expensive to get these models running at scale. Hallucinations are getting better, but they're still not there. We see OpenAI came out with version 5, the 5.0 model, and they're like, this is great because it's got all the other models built into it. And we weren't even 2 days after release, and people were like, context windows are wrong. It's doing the problem solving wrong. It's like, there was like a lot of challenges with it depending on what tier you were using the product in. So it's not, and that's them taking 9 months to come out with it and talking about how great it was going to be for like 9 months, right? Hit the market and really didn't hit the market. It does a lot of great things, but it didn't do everything it promised. And I think we'll see that. I think we'll see that it'll take a long time for larger organizations to adopt it just because they move slowly. Smaller companies will adapt a lot faster, and we'll see the promises that are being made. We won't see all those promises come to fruition, but we will see some great changes that will be impacting to the way that we work and the way that we work with AI.
This was amazing, Grant. Do you have any book recommendations, TV series, movies, anything?
Book recommendations, not off the top of my head. I really appreciate, I've been watching lately, Diary of a CEO. It's a podcast. I find them really interesting. He has some really interesting guests on, and they often talk about AI as a topic as it comes up in the different contexts that he's interviewing different CEOs. So I find it really interesting. And I also find it really interesting to kind of get these different perspectives from these different leaders on what's happening in their industry, what's happening with technology that's impacting them. And it's not a technology show per se. It's really just talking about the different organizations, different thought leaders, and what they're thinking, where the future is. And I find that very interesting. That's kind of been my go-to lately.
That sounds amazing. And is there a way people can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can connect with me at fisherpeakmanagement.com. So just G DeCecco at fisherpeakmanagement.com. Or you can just go to the website fisherpeakmanagement.com or fisherpeakai.com. I've got two different websites, one for me as a portfolio of my work, and the other one is my community around AI.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Welcome.